I am live. I am reading in English out of Joan Marshall Grant's book about herself and by others about her, as Speaking from the Heart, Ethics, Reincarnation and What It Means to be Human. This was edited by Nicola Bennett, Jane La and Sophie Rossoff. And I am doing some extracts because I've read some of her books in English, her 7 books which were about her own life, her reincarnations, and I think it's really useful to know a bit more about the woman. And so I'm picking a few chapters. Today I'm reading chapter 6, entitled The Galilean. In 1943, at work on her 5th book, Scarlet Feather, and busy with visitors, Joan began to experience revelations or messages from someone upstairs, whom she first identified as Ne Sera, and then recognized as Jesus, whom she called Isus, and later the Galilean. On 8th of March, Charles recorded that, after dinner, the conversation turned on the church, and Joan felt once again the fury which these dogmas often aroused. Suddenly she said, "Be quiet. I want to try to get something, but I know it's so big I may not be able to find any words to describe it." Greeted as the enemy of my enemies, she is reminded that when you were a child you saw me in the garden of your home and told your mother that you had been talking to a young man with a red beard and very blue eyes. At the end the voice, Isus, says, "And there is only one line which I cherish of all that has been written of me in many books, and the greatest of these is charity." Charles' notes say that later, while Joan was relaxed in her bath, she was trying to find the meaning of faith, hope, and charity. A man can live by faith, recognizing the light in the heart of another. He can live by hope, knowing that one day the light will be kindled in his own heart. He can live by charity. When the light is in his own heart, he can quench the darkness from an earth. As Joan was going to sleep, she said, "I wish that I were a great painter or a great sculptor, for then I could depict the real Christ on the cross as I have just seen it, instead of the dying man hanging by nails wearing the cross of thorns. There is a young man, his arms over the crossbar of a cross which is not of black dead wood, but of a growing tree. He is leaning back, laughing up at the sky. From his feet and the palms of his hands roses are springing, and he wears a wreath of red roses and white roses, which are the symbol of the duality of mortal and immortal love." As it happened, that year at Treleaden was a particularly good one for roses. This is in Cornwall. One day in June, Charles went for a walk in the woods and found an enormous white foxglove, so white that it seemed to glow in the half-light under the trees. He picked it and stood it in a vase between the windows in the sitting room like an enormous candle. He massed roses of all colours on the mantelpiece. In the middle, in front of a sculpture of a Chinese sage they nicknamed the Answerer, he placed a white rose and a red. That evening after dinner the scent was so strong that it seemed to make a mood of its own in the room. Conversation with their guests, Kathleen Barker and Bill Younger, lapsed, and Joan declared the atmosphere was portentous. Charles suggested she try to record on Invocation to the Lord of the Roses. This is his account written in the third person of what happened. The presence was far more vivid and substantial even than the previous Isus experiences. And when, at first, the three of them did not hold out their physical hands, she, Joan, was amazed that they could not see him standing in front of the roses. When they received the blessing, each felt a different response. Charles felt the contact on the palm of his hands as a red-hot penny, stigmata. Kathleen felt intense warmth in her hands. Bill, that the presence was high above the altar. Joan felt a rose put into her hands, and with it touched her forehead, eyes, mouth, and ears. Thy name on my forehead, thy vision be in my eyes, thy words be in my mouth, thy voice be in my ears. Then she held the rose to her heart. Thy love live in me. The Lord of the Roses is the name in which I come to those with whom I am beloved, even as I'm with you now and yesterday. Shut your eyes, remember only the altar of my roses. Hold out your hands towards me and feel my life warm on your palms and on your foreheads, whereon the scars of the thorns are healed. Hold out your hands. Can you not see me? I'm not a gardener. Blessed are they that see me, who make an altar in my name, wherein I am welcomed as the friend and as companion of the rose who shares with you my immortality. I shall return and be with you always. For Joan and Charles, their friends, the roses were a familiar symbol. Christian, Jungian, but that evening, symbol became reality. Certainly, it was an experience that resonated through the rest of Joan's lifetime. One that she often alluded to. For example, after an exceptional lunch in rural France, she and Charles were presented by the patronne with the roses from all the restaurant tables. How did she know that to Charles and me, roses have a magical significance, wondered Joan. And she realizes, tell your roses that that's the real use of the rosary. Each rose is a memory of love in action, saying, whom have I loved? But it was not until 1945 that Joan mentioned an actual, far memory recall of a woman, maybe Mary Magdalene, who was among Christ's followers. The odor of spikenard. You said I would always smell the odor of spikenard because I brought you the ointment. I, the most lowly of women in the eyes of your disciples, a woman whom you had protected when they tried to stone me. And you said, remember always and tell those who really love me, because they understand the strength and the weakness of my humanity, that my life was not easy, and that my strength was born of the knowing of weakness, and my recognition of the slow Gethsemane of the betrayal of millennia. And you said, tell them that it was not easy to die, but in that knowledge you shall see only the glory of my living. Tell them, Mary, for you will remember because of the warmth of your ordinary mortality, that I was a man among men, who could speak to them only because there is no sin which I have not known in the time of the galaxies, and which I have not taken into my own hands and transmuted into the water of life. Tell them, Mary, or they will make of me only another martyr, that I am a man among men, a friend, a brother. At dawn I die, but I have died many times. They cannot deny me, for at least in death I share the heritage of man. Don't let them make me another martyr. They will try to set me apart, but remember me. Speak among the women and the men who, because they have loved anything, Mary, a child, a dog, a plant of hyssop, the clouds of morning or the rain will know me. Tell them in that name I shall not be forgotten. Tell them that my death was not important. I thought when I was young I should grow to be an old man, loved for his wisdom, and that men would understand me. But help them to remember that they found me in the little things as you found me, the man with fever by the roadside. You only saw me as a man with fever whom you, the outcast of the villages, secured because you thought and knew that I was humble, because I was great, even as you were humble, because you were ashamed. Do you remember how I said to you, Mary, you have asked me what to do with the wages of sin, 23 silver pieces with the head of Caesar. Should you give them to the poor, or throw them into the sea, or bury them deep in the ground where they should be forever forgotten? And I said, Mary, follow your heart and you will find me. And you took the 23 pieces of silver with the head of Caesar, and you bought the jar of ointment, because you loved me. And they said, who were standing by, who is this woman who has sinned? And on your feet she puts that which she bought with the wages of sin. Do you remember how I looked at them and said, I shall never forget, and she will always remember the odour of spikenard, which was the love which was bought with the betrayal, because she realized that I was lonely, as all men are lonely, who see further than the horizon of other people with whom they long to share that dear horizon. Remember that always from the wages of sin may be born that understanding, from which may be gained the spikenard of the imperishable host. So this is the first mention of her mentioning the Galilean, and I continue this another time. Today is the 24th of February 2024.